One day, when our oratory class was working on our speeches, Caroline O'Keefe hit my arm as usual to get my attention. I proceeded to look at her as I took out my earbud, as she said, "What are you writing your speech about?" "Well, I really want to write about my grandmother." "Oh, nice. Is she going to be there when you present it?" No, she's actually dead." This proceeded to silence O'Keefe as she went into her awkward, "I'm sorry" face. I'm sure you can picture how awkward she got. Well, in this nervousness, she proceeded to ask a second question. "Is your grandfather going to be there?" No, he also passed away." The truth is, I wish they could be here tonight to hear me talk. They both meant so much to me. But it's been a few years since they passed away, so O'Keefe's questions actually didn't make me sad. Instead, they got to me thinking to back when I was young, and especially in particular to the impact my grandmother had on me when I was growing up. I was 6 years old, and it was a cold winter night around 7 p.m. We were standing outside the Chelmsford Forum, and all of us were holding noisemakers and posters. Half my face was painted black, the other was painted red. My entire family was there, including my grandmother. All of us just waiting for that line to move, shivering. Okay, for you guys to truly understand this story, we need to rewind a little bit. My cousin Taylor is 10 years older than me, and she was currently a sophomore at high school. Her sister Courtney was a freshman, and they were both on the Marblehead girls varsity ice hockey team. Well, at the time, they were very good, and they were playing Chelmsford High School in the semifinal round of the playoffs. It was a huge deal. My family was ecstatic because we had two girls competing on the team, especially my grandmother, who we called Gigi. So there we were, standing outside the line, waiting to buy tickets. Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to get rid of your posters." This tall figure stood in front of me and my mom in uniform with a big Chelmsford Police Department badge on his chest. My knees trembled and my chest pounded. "Excuse me, what? No, we won't. We worked on these for hours." My grandmother pushed me back as she proceeded to step in front of me. I'm sorry, what did you say? Will I need to take them away from you?" Try me. All I could think was, oh my God, we're gonna get kicked out. I tugged on my grandmother's jacket just to make her stop talking. "Please, please, please don't get us kicked out," I called as I was being pulled away from the mix-up. As I walked back to the car, I faintly heard the screaming pitch hit my ears. My grandmother screamed, "You can take away our signs, but you will never take away our spirit." My grandmother, Gigi, was one of the best cheerleaders I know. Most people have heard my voice, and I am very loud, and my voice travels a lot. This is also true for my mom and her sister, my Aunt Tracy. This is solely because of my grandmother. As I said, she was one of the best supporters. It didn't matter the team, the event, the time. She was always there with a smile on her face and her loud voice. She would drive hours back and forth from her little condo in Pembroke, Massachusetts, to various football, soccer, lacrosse, and hockey games that me and my cousins and my brother would compete in. She even has an award named after her called the Gigi Award, and it is given to the Marblehead girls varsity ice hockey player with the best enthusiasm. Personally, in my opinion, this is the best award you can receive. Even though she was my grandmother, I didn't ever actually receive this award, but that's okay. My grandmother had a big enough impact on my life that I didn't need an award that said, "Gigi Award given to Amanda Lee Monahan," to make me feel any closer to her. It reassures me that other people will get a part of her in which she will live on for generations and generations. Although my grandmother was a huge yeller, she was also quite lazy. Anyone who has a dog in particular, or any pet you have to constantly walk, take out, or care for, there are always just those moments where you don't want to. Well, I know I'm not home very often, and I get those a lot. Well, eventually we all get up, take our dog out, and take care of them. Personally, I think this story shows where I get my laziness, even though I had to ask my mom for a lot of details. My cousins Taylor, Courtney, and Ian, my Aunt Tracy, and Uncle Bill had a dog before I was born named Zeus. He was a black lab. As I said, my grandmother would come up and visit us a lot, and when she did and things got crazy, she would take care of Zeus. Well, one day she was taking care of Zeus, and he had to go out, and she did not want to take him out. So she decided, finally, that she would. She got up, she grabbed her car keys, she grabbed the dog leash, she grabbed the dog, and then she proceeded to walk out the door. She then descended the stairs, and instead of taking a right to walk to the end of the dead-end street, she continued forward and unlocked her car. She got in the car and rolled down her window. Zeus was not in the car. Just picture this: a middle-aged woman in a fairly new black Camry, driving about 2 miles an hour, her arm outside the window, holding a leash that led to Zeus, the black lab. Yes, my grandmother drove down the street walking my dog because she was too lazy. Now, if that's not the definition of laziness, I don't know what is. When I was very young and my grandmother would stay at my house a lot, which was often, she would always call me and my brother into her room around 7 a.m. in the morning. We would climb under the covers and close our eyes. My brother and I knew this routine very well. She would pull out her magic necklace. That small little gold necklace could control my imagination. At the time, that's what I thought. Now looking back, it was just me and my brother. My grandmother just helped us realize it. We would sit under the covers, eyes closed, and touch the magic necklace. We would then count 3, 2, 1, and figuratively open our eyes to the destination where we had decided to go. However, between me and my brother, deciding where to go was the hardest thing. My brother would always pick these elaborate places such as Fiji or Russia. Me, I had one place. This magical place was my dream vacation. This magical trip allowed me to never wait in any of those long lines. This place I could always run from ride to ride, dragging my family around with those cute little ears sitting on top of my head. As you all can probably guess, this place was Disney World. This generic place for children to want to go was my #1 pick, and it never changed. I think after the 5th time I said Disney World, my brother was ready to shove me off the bed. However, my grandmother would regulate our fighting and immediately take us to my destination. I would always go first because I was the oldest, or so I thought. I guess Gigi would always take us to my choice first because she wanted the more exciting and elaborate place second. Whatever. We would take our walk down the Disney streets to my favorite ride in the whole entire park, Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith. This was one of my favorite rides because it was the only ride in which my whole family would go on, including my mother, who doesn't like rides. Although at the time we weren't with my whole family, I still had my brother and my grandmother. We would get on the roller coaster, figuratively, and my grandmother would always play an Aerosmith song to simulate it even more. At least I can speak for myself that for the longest time, I actually thought I was imagining the song rather than her actually playing it. Little did I know. She would shake the bed, flip the sheets to simulate the turns and flips of the ride. It was actually amazing work she put in for 2 little annoying kids. We would then say goodbye to Disney and go wherever my brother wanted to go. We would lay back and go to the beach, and even in some instances, me and my brother would fall back asleep. These imaginative trips were always the highlight of my morning. My town, Marblehead, every year has a youth hockey exchange with a small town just outside of Montreal, Quebec. St. Lambert hockey players would come down to Marblehead in November, and we would be paired up, 1 American to 1 Canadian. The Canadian players would stay with us, and then in February, when we went up to Canada, we would stay with them. So I was about 8 years old, and it was November. We were in the middle of the tournament. It was about halfway through one of my 3 games that weekend, and I had already gotten 1 penalty in the game so far. So my whole family was in the stands, including Gigi. Everything was fine until I got my 2nd penalty. As I skated over to the penalty box, I faintly heard my name being called. Then, clearer than the clearest window, I heard, "Amanda, just pack a lunch." That was my grandmother. For anyone who doesn't know what pack a lunch means, it's basically like, you stink, you should stay wherever you are, and in my case, that was the penalty box. So my grandmother basically said I sucked in front of a bunch of my friends, family, and, well, Canadian strangers. My grandmother always liked to keep me in check, in line, literally. I've always been very neat when it comes to coloring inside the lines of any picture. This is because of Gigi. Every time I would go to her house, I would color. I would sit at that small kids' table in her basement and flip through the many coloring books she had to find one picture I'd like to draw. Although she said I could choose my photos, I really couldn't. Every time I picked one that she wouldn't like, she would go, if you want. And if I didn't pick the one she liked, she would be like, I like the last one, and physically turn my page back. I would then proceed to color that picture. When I colored, I actually thought I was being watched by the FBI. If I went outside those lines, she would raise her voice, as she liked to call it, instead of yelling. She would then make me go to a completely new picture and start over. Even though this doesn't seem too bad, it was dreadful to color. Still to this day, I cannot stand when people or myself go outside the lines coloring. So for all my friends here, don't use as an excuse to make me angry. After we colored, we would always finish the day with a movie, Little Women to be specific. Even though I have probably slept over my grandmother's house over 1,000 times, I don't think I've ever seen this film from start to finish. And this is because of one reason. My grandmother, every night, would make me sit at the bottom of her bed with my back turned to the TV with a bottle of lotion right next to me. Yes, my grandmother made me cream her feet. Every night, as we watched the same movie. However, this is one of the last clear-cut memories I had with my grandmother. As I've said before, my grandmother was always there throughout my childhood, and I actually don't have a lot of memories without her in them. My cousins, my brother, and I growing up played the piano, but I recently after that switched to the cello, similar to my older cousin Courtney. Well, I'd been practicing and taking private lessons to impress my grandmother for my first piano recital. However, my grandmother wasn't physically there. It was a normal night. I went to bed for another day of school, and I was in 5th grade. My brother was in 3rd grade. The next morning, I wasn't woken up like usual. Why did my mom let me sleep in? Why am I so late for school? School didn't get canceled unless it snowed, as I ripped open my blinds to see clear grounds and skies. I remember hearing my mom's sobs as I opened the door to see if my brother was there. We walked up the stairs to my parents' room. Those words continued to be one of the worst days of my life. I was broken. My heart physically hurt, and there was no way to have it go away. My grandmother suddenly passed away on November 18th, 2011, due to a heart attack, my brother's birthday. I will never forget this day. My grandmother will never leave my mind or side. I truly believe she is my guardian angel, and I know that every single time I perform, whether it's cello, sports, or something like this, even that first time, my first performance in front of anyone, she was there by my side. So to re-answer Caroline O'Keefe's first question, Yes, my grandmother is here tonight, and I could not be happier. Thank you.